dream remains alive for the Houston Cougars. A furious comeback to knock off Duke and advance to the national championship game.
Here is Zion Chris, big hole, open sesame. Zion Chris, wow, the 72-yard house call.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scotland Podcast. Bobby, Cougar football has a game to talk about. We're going to do that tonight. We have, between the two of us, we were saying this before we hit record and started this weekly Houston Cougar podcast that we do here. We both had more notes than we can remember for a long, long time, meaning a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. Two other Cougar sports that we are extremely excited about were in action. In addition to Cougar football, we will have plenty to say about them as well. Picks to make this week. A big, maybe last time in a long time, rivalry game for Cougar football. It's about to be played. We're going to preview them and also have a guest to talk the rice out. Somebody we're always very excited to have on. Buddy, at the risk of taking any more time than we talked about Cougar sports, I will shut up and ask you what I always ask you. How you doing, amigo?
Good, man. After the long work weekend that I had, everyone else get the 3-day weekend. I get a extended extra work kind of deal. But all good. A little tired. Slept in a little bit today, but overall ready to talk some Cougar sports with you, buddy.
Was gonna say, obviously, not downplaying the hey, I'd like to not be working Labor Day weekend, but at least you get the Tuesday off while I am getting the backlog of people who would have been emailing me Monday and Tuesday, and the not great feeling coming off a longer than usual weekend, having to go back into the 9 to 5. Got to mention, of course, the top here, like we always do, patreon.com/shpodcast, patreon.com/shpawdcast. That's the way to support the work that Bobby and I do on a weekly basis. Also access to bonus content like our full summer of premium episodes and the instant react that Bobby and I recorded a mere minutes after the Cougar SFA game went final. Access to all of that. If any of that sounds good to you, if the idea of supporting this weekly Houston Cougar podcast sounds good to you, please, 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 if you do not do so already, go to patreon.com/shpodcast. And if you do already, because there are a large number of you that support us and also listen here on the free feed, thank you. I feel like I don't do that very much. I feel like I solicit donations, but don't thank people for donations. So thank you very much to those of you also that support us. Got to, of course, lead with the Cougar football victory, the long-awaited opener of the second season of Willie Fritz's tenure here. The Cougars soundly defeated the Stephen F. Austin Lumberjacks 27-0 on Thursday night. Truly, even considering the level of competition, one of the more dominant Cougar defensive performances that you will ever see. Bit slower of a start on the offensive side and not the kind of eye-opening corresponding performance that you got from the defense, but not at all devoid of positives on offense either. Plenty to dig into, even if you'll probably hear both of us say at least once that you can only take so much against an opponent from this level. It was nice to finally have some on-field football to talk about. And as we did last season, we're going to lead with something I enjoyed doing very much, and we will be doing it for the coming season. The two of us will each give our overlooked play of the game. Bobby, let's hear yours, and I guess also any big picture thoughts you want to lead with.
Yeah, just kind of big picture thoughts. We're gonna talk more in depth about what we saw out there. But overall, like we said, you weren't gonna get too many questions answered in a positive way in this game because you have the caveat of who you played. But there was going to be the opportunity to get some answers in a negative way, and I think we might have avoided that. But anyways, going to overlooked play. First drive from the Cougs in the second half, 3rd and 9. Tanner Koziol picks up an 11-yard reception. I don't know if it's a key play necessarily to the Cougs winning this game. It extended a drive that pretty much put the nail in the coffin. It kind of felt like if you come out and get stopped there, maybe SFA goes down, scores. the tie gets a little tighter around the neck if you do that. But again, I don't know if this is a key play to the Cougs winning the game, but it's really more the kind of thing I wanted and expected to see from the Wigman-Koziol connection. I know I talked a lot about Wigman being Romo, Koziol kind of being a Jason Witten type figure, and I think with this play, I wanted to see this kind of thing, and that's what we got out of it. In a game like this, it's kind of hard to pick one play that may have gone unnoticed that really changed the outcome of the game or something like that, especially with a score like this. But that kind of play, just watching it, I went back and rewatched the game, and that one just really felt like one that could be a preview of what to see the rest of the season.
I like it. Foreshadowing and all. And also, I think 20-0. I think it would have been 20-0 if it wasn't 27-0. But I think the fact that truly put this game on ice at least makes it noteworthy. My pick, I believe, meets the definition of overlooked because it came so early in this football game. But I picked Will James's really nice open field tackle from his cornerback position for a 1-yard loss on SFA's first possession, which was the first possession for either team in this football game. I picked it because that play was a defensive tone setter for the evening, and more specifically that this very new look Cougar defensive backfield, one of the units that we had the most questions about of all the units on this team this year, was really going to come to play on Thursday night. And after the game, I saw a lot more of the highlight play on the next SFA possession by your other starting cornerback, Latrell McCutcheon Sr., and that was a really nice play, and it deserved its flowers, it deserved its highlights on its own merits. For me, the fact from the jump that you saw a new Cougar defensive back making a 10 out of 10 perfect open field tackle wasn't an aberration. It was as clear of an indication as any that SFA's offense was going to be in for a long, long night ahead of them. I think it's easy to forget something that happened pretty early in a football game, and I wanted to make sure, as the two of us sat in front of our microphones, that we gave Will James his recognition for a great tone-setting play that thankfully was indicative of us being about to see one of the more dominant defensive efforts from our time as Cougar fans.
Yeah, hard to argue with that play from you. Yeah, I think it really, to your point, did set the tone. And you saw that multiple times on kind of the first couple of drives from SFA, in that they tried to kind of run a little bit of that. I don't know if I'd necessarily call it bubble action out on the perimeter, but it definitely, you made some open field tackles and just to your point, set the tone for what we kind of expected.
So we'll start with the Cougar defensive performance that, again, going to caveat it for not the last time, certainly not the first time, against an opponent you should expect to do fairly well against, but was also, this performance, still no exaggeration, one of the best we've ever seen and probably will ever see. There was, of course, you had key guys back on this defense, but also you had a ton of new guys playing their first actual game in a Houston Cougar uniform. And yeah, you had Jalen Garner, who ended up being your tackles leader, Kentrell Webb, Latrell McCutcheon, who we've already mentioned here, one of our personal favorites, Carlos Allen, Brandon Mack, forced a fumble this one as well. But I just named 5 players, and you rotated, I would say, at least 20 different guys for a good amount of snaps on Thursday evening. And my biggest picture takeaway is, if you didn't know it coming in, this certainly didn't look, just from the eye test, like a bunch of defensive players in their first ever actual game playing together. Bobby, what were your biggest takeaways from this Cougar defensive performance?
Yeah, man, this was a really good FCS offense, and they brought a lot of talent back from that FCS offense last year. And frankly, that didn't show up versus the Cougs. I mean, the Cougs absolutely dominated them. The Cougs and the other Cougs of BYU were actually the only Big 12 members to shut out their FCS opponent. Not saying that others didn't play well or got upset or anything like that, but if you're going to play an FCS opponent, shutting them out's a pretty good thing to do there, especially one that had that kind of offense. Hell, K-State almost lost to an FCS opponent, so think it could have been worse. The first thing I noticed, just you kind of pointed this out with your overlooked play, was how well the Cougs tackled. You saw the Cougs bringing guys down on first contact, which is super important. And we'll talk more about that when we preview Rice a little bit. But you had Trey McCutcheon laying an absolute hammer early on, setting that tone. But overall, just a clinic by the defense. SFA had the 40-yard completion on their final drive, I want to say it was, where they went deep, kind of beat us on the seam, 40-yard
Plus, it was their
pickup there.
backup quarterback too.
Yeah. Besides that, Sam, can you tell me SFA's longest play?
This has to be offense, right? We're not including that the punt return touchdown where Doherty kind of overkicked his coverage.
Correct. Their longest play in the game.
9 yards.
It was an 11-yard pass on like their second drive, which is just crazy. Actually, ESPN shows one as like an 18-yard pickup, and you click it. I was like, "Ooh, I wonder what play that was." It was actually a 3-yard pickup and a 15-yard penalty on the Cougs on the personal foul, because you hit him late, which that also popped back up in my rewatch, and I was like, "That is a ticky-tack foul." Yeah. But
this is the same crew that called that, like, there's an unsportsmanlike because they were on the TCU UNC game. Yes. And like the TCU guy, like for a half second held out the football when he was running back the pick six, and they called an unsportsmanlike on it. Like, come on, guys. Sorry.
Yep. No. That's absolutely crazy. Like, even if you're playing an FCS team, to only have one play over 10 yards besides a garbage time playing the fourth stringers is wild to really think about. You saw PFF reward a couple of Cougs number 1 and number 2. I didn't see who it was. It
was Zelmar Vetter and Mark Stampley the second in that order.
Thank you. Like, I saw it and I tried to find it again today, and I was just like clicking through different places, and I just didn't see who it was. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about this unit. You couldn't ask for a better performance. Week 1, new season, an FCS opponent. Do you know how well these corners are going to do against top flight Big 12 competition after this? No, but you really couldn't have gotten any questions you had about this defense heading into this game answered in a more positive way than you saw on Thursday.
You can't answer that question, but let's say we're coming back here and SFA had burned you for 2, 3, 4, even in a Cougar victory, they got some deep passing plays against you. At that point, you're just like, well, if they're doing this against us,
exactly,
it's fair to ask what an FBS offense with a higher grade passing attack could do to you. And yeah, those other questions I fully agree with you, are not answered yet. You're going to face 11 better offenses than the one SFA did in all likelihood the rest of the season. But at least it's not if we can't stop these guys, like how do I even begin to form the argument that we're not going to be a significant worse defense? And I think a lot of stuff TBD, but you couldn't have passed the test in front of you with any more flying colors. My first impression watching this one live was pretty similar to yours. Just how well the Cougar defense, and more specifically, how well the Cougar defensive backs were tackling. And defensive back tackling alone doesn't make a good defense. I mean, you need a defensive front that can stand up to the run and create pressure so those defensive backs aren't on an island. A defensive coordinator that can help put guys in the right positions, position coaches who can reinforce the correct way to play the position and also reinforce the requirements of your defensive coordinator scheme. But man, good defensive back positioning and tackling, which we saw in spades on Thursday night, really does solve a lot of your problems, really does raise the floor of like what you think a defense can be. For some reason, when I was thinking about this versus some of the previous opening defensive performances, I went back to the 2017 opener, the one that was weirdly late because of Hurricane Harvey against Arizona. It was week 2, and we were like the last Saturday night week 2 game. Like, we waited, it felt like fucking forever. And I remember that one being a low-scoring Cougar win, but I didn't leave that game feeling wild about our defense, even though technically we didn't allow very many points. I mean, you could probably say the same thing about 2 years ago, the home opener against UTSA. We were all happy to beat that specific opponent no matter how it happened. But certainly with hindsight, that game looks a lot more like it was UTSA's veteran quarterback being injured than U of H ever really figuring anything out defensively. And I guess my long and meandering point here is that this wasn't SFA constantly shooting themselves in the foot, their quarterback missing open guys, their receivers dropping passes. This was the Cougar defense being on their asses from the word go. And we talked about that Will James overlooked play. I'm going to shout out a couple other first-year Cougars in the secondary. Your co-stars at the star, the hybrid linebacker safety position, Mark Stampley and Rook Brown, both guys who made standout plays in this one. Stampley had an INT, graded out really well in coverage by PFF, as you mentioned, and then Brown had that big sack and negative play in the second half on a blitz where SFA just absolutely didn't account for Rook Brown. You mentioned Zelmar Vetter, that transfer from Sac State, had a team high. Made a really nice, and I mentioned this I almost went for this one as my overlooked play, but made a really savvy play where, I mean, the call would have been OPI regardless, but did a good job making sure the back judge or whichever specific referee was on him wasn't going to miss the SFA guy extending his arm and doing the stuff that's probably going to get you flagged for OPI. Also kept himself, I think, in decent position. Like, he wasn't just diving on the ground and then, let's just say the ref decided not to flag it, leaving an open guy for a touchdown. It was a very savvy veteran move. One of those things, the more I think about it from this game, the more I believe it's a case of the box score, the standard football stats kind of lying to you, was the 5 tackles for loss the Cougars combined for as a team. Because I think that number, in my opinion, because it's not a standard number. You hear 5 tackles for loss, and you think, we didn't really make very many plays behind the line of scrimmage. We weren't really active in this one. And that just doesn't line up to what you saw on that one. I think that number has a lot more to do with SFA getting into a fairly early multi-score hole, and by the later stage of the second quarter and certainly the second half, going slightly more pass heavy. And yeah, I think also the decision to not put a bunch of stuff on film in terms of exotic blitzes and stuff in week 1 against an opponent you don't need to put exotic stuff against. But we saw glimpses of interesting blitzes and looks from your first-year defensive coordinator, Austin Armstrong. And of course, say for the umpteenth time, everything from here is going to be much tougher, but you can't even find any nitpicky negatives. You can't even be like, well, I wish this was better. I mean, any negatives here are just purely hypothetical. Well, how's it going to work against a better defense? Which I fully co-sign, by the way. I fully agree with that, but all your negatives at the point are just hypothetical, which, again, you can absolutely justify the position of this was a great opening effort, but I'd like to see what they do against better opponents, because quite frankly, that probably describes my position in the defense. But to what you could actually grade them on what they did on the football field, it was 100 out of 100. Not really anything you could quibble with, which is good, even if there are things that were just impossible to answer from this week against this opponent.
Yeah, if you're trying to find something to quibble with here, you are desperately grasping for straws, trying to find something to complain about on the defensive side of the ball.
A few last defensive thoughts, if you will allow me.
Yeah, go ahead, bud.
He wasn't one of your top tacklers, but I feel like I saw FIU transfer Eddie Walls III creating a lot of pressure and just generally being around the ball when plays are being made. We'll also mention true freshman Rashad Sterling, who was one of your standout 2025 high school signees. Broke into the week 1 2 deep and then had 3 total tackles on Thursday. I'm excited to see how that guy develops. I guess my last overarching thought, I thought against a top 25 FCS opponent with a lot of their veteran difference makers returning, plus you had standouts like Richard Reese, who came from Baylor, going against a U of H defense that was a large percentage guys playing their first games in a U of H uniform. What did we say in the Patreon post-game react? It was like you said earlier, it wasn't the kind of potential matchup that you went into with heartburn, but maybe indigestion. There we go. That's what I was trying to remember exactly what we said there. And instead of having any indigestion, the on-field result was SFA had 144 total yards and 2.5 yards per play. And 56 of those 144 yards came on their final 2 possessions, very much in garbage time. Unless you're playing an FCS team that went 1-11 or 2-10 last year, that's a crazy level of dominance. I think even if you just wanted to look after the season at FBS versus FCS games, I'm pretty confident you're not going to see a lot more many more defensive performances that were as dominant as you saw from the Cougs on Thursday night. I mean, the really hard work starts now, but a pretty flawless first week for all involved with this unit.
Yeah, it's hard to be angry about anything you saw from just about anybody on that unit. When I took the unders on passing yards, I was fairly confident in it, but let me tell you, I think I texted you. It was quite funny. I was like, unless something happens, I'm pretty sure I'm going to hit this. And you go,
It was
Buddy,
like
they
12-13 in the fourth quarter. So like, yeah.
And you were like, buddy, they need like another 150 passing yards. I think you're good. It was something ridiculous like that. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm good too, man. I think I'm good too.
Yeah, good pick by you. Going to the other side of the ball, not an effort from the Cougar offense that was completely devoid of positives by any means, but also not unfair to say that we aren't going to be as overflowing with positives about the offense as we are about the defense. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to say that.
So what did you see that you think is most notable from this offensive performance, Bobby?
You know, the questions were offensive line and then how would Connor Wigman look in this game. And I think he came out a little amped. You could just kind of see that very first play they decided to run play action, try that deep kind of skinny post. I don't think that was a go or a fade. He was kind of running towards the middle of the field. So that kind of deep skinny throws, he overthrew his guy by about 10 yards. I don't exactly remember who it was to. Then you look on the TD on the touchdown to Kozial. Same thing. He kind of overthrew Kozial. Kozial makes a really nice catch there. Like, if you go back and watch it, Kozial gets 2 in. It was pretty well over his head. So I think he was a little amped up, and you could kind of see it. It took him a little bit to kind of get settled in. I thought the O-line looked okay. Was it great? I don't think so. Was it better than last year? Unequivocally, yes. I think there's no doubt that I think this was the a better performance than what we saw last year, what we would have seen had the same group kind of been coming for continued playing this year. I think I said this to you during the game, and I may have said it on the premium post-game reaction, but it really feels like the floor of this offensive line is the ceiling of last year's line. It was, you can see the different levels of just pure talent on this offensive line. I'd argue the TCU game last year was probably our best performance offensive line wise. And I would say that this was on par with that kind of performance. Am I super satisfied heading forward and looking at it going like, oh man, I can't wait to see what this offensive line does against Texas Tech or something like that. Like, yeah, I'm a little excited to see it, but not necessarily in a positive way. And then moving from that, the Cougs had 16 completions, and I didn't really notice this while watching the game, but then on a rewatch and kind of looking at the box score, 7 of those 16 went to Kozial. And I'd like to think the receivers could just do a better job at getting open. I don't know scheme-wise what was going on. I'm not watching the all 22 over and over and over again. So I don't know if it was scheme. I don't know if the guys just weren't breaking free, but the announcers multiple times mentioned like they're playing one-on-one in the on the receivers and daring U of H to kind of to pass on them, and they're just not doing it. It was really interesting to see that. I'm in my head, I'm just kind of chalking that up to having a boring game plan, just kind of a bland game plan to kind of hide some of the better stuff. Last year also, there were quite a few what the hell kind of play calls. Like, what would even possess you to, like, it's 3rd and 6. Why are we running a delayed, handoff here? Like, it just didn't make a lot of sense. Didn't really get that much this game. Didn't get those vibes much during this game, if at all. There were a couple of times you kind of heard the fans getting a little restless with some run plays, but it just didn't. And again, that kind of goes to the receivers, that kind of stuff. But I do love that I didn't have to really think about that. And, overall, though, I thought the offense was fine. I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think it was good. I thought it was just fine. Heading into this game, we said you can answer some questions positive, or you're not going to be able to answer many questions positively, but you could definitely answer them in a negative way. And I don't think you answered any in a negative way, but I think you still have lots of questions to be answered. Sam, what'd you see?
For me, before this game kicked off, the thing that was going to have the most effect on how I leave this game feeling about U of H's offense was my hope that I would see Connor Wigman make multiple throws that very clearly neither of the guys who started at quarterback the last 2 seasons made, or made more than very rarely. And that absolutely was the case on multiple throws Wigman made on Thursday night. None more so, in my opinion, than his third and final touchdown pass, which went to Amari Thomas. It was a good route by Thomas, a great job by him beating a future Sunday player in Charles Demings one-on-one, but also basically a perfect throw on over 40 yards in the air from Connor Wigman. The other throws that I'm kind of thinking of might not have been 100% as spectacular, but you could go through the tape on Thursday night and find multiple other throws that Donovan Smith or Zion Chris Gramillion simply didn't make with any kind of regularity in the last 2 years offense. But you also saw some of the things from Wigman that lost him the starting job at A&M, though it'd be unfair to say injuries there didn't play a big part. A lot of the first half, you said he looked amped. He looks kind of uncomfortable out there. That first touchdown pass, he almost threw it over your 6'7" tight end's head. And some of that, I think might have been some surprise that he was that wide open, that you were expecting to have to kind of get this over a opposing defender and then realize, oh no, I can just lob this in the air. But that's not what quarterback's doing out there. A quarterback's usually, if you're a fan, you don't realize this, quarterback's usually throw into a spot. A quarterback's not waiting for a guy to complete his route. A quarterback's anticipating, I think the guy's going to be around there, because if you wait for the guy to get to the spot, nothing will ever develop and you'll probably get sacked before. Like it just, that's not how this works. So excuse him a little bit, but I'll do the compliment criticism compliment sandwich here. I really loved what Wigman showed you as a runner. I don't want him carrying the ball 15, 20 times a game, but Thursday night represented my kind of optimistic hope for what he could be as a runner in this offense, as an occasional guy who picks his spot with his legs. He was very smart about doing that. And I think even against better opponents, that's going to be a nice thing we see from him with at least like semi-regularity throughout the season. We got to talk about the offensive line. You already kind of covered it. What were you going to say? Sorry.
Can I just jump in on the Wigman running part? You saw a couple of designed runs for him, which really kind of kept that SFA defense at bay from blitzing as much. You saw a couple of draw plays with him where he picked up 4 or 5 yards. So yeah, I didn't point that out, but that's a great call out by you right there.
So the offensive line, it's not all bad. And now that I've had a few days to let my thoughts marinate, I think you contribute a good amount, but not everything, but a good amount of the O-line problems you saw in this first game to the fact that it was mostly guys playing together for the first time. I want to shout out Duarte for this info. You had 6 different Cougar O-linemen play at least 16 snaps on Thursday night. 4 of those were guys who had never played in a game for U of H before Thursday night. And if you just look at the 5 guys who played the most snaps, Alvin Ebosele, Matthew Wyckoff, Demetrius Hunter, Dalton Merriman, and Mackenzie Agnello, Hunter was the only guy of that group who played a snap here before the current season. You also had some mixing and matching of personnel, which you'd kind of expect in a game that has a sort of preseason vibe like this one. Ebosele played mostly at left tackle, but still played 12 snaps at right tackle. Wyckoff played guard and center. Agnello played mostly at guard, but played a series at center too, which was where he primarily played in New Mexico last season. You can see the staff mixing and matching, and quite frankly, you can afford to do that against an opponent of SFA's caliber. You do need to eventually get things more solid. There does need to be, at some point, less shuffling around, and I personally still need some convincing when it comes to this group eventually being an effective O-line, but I still left this game where you are, 100% convinced that your floor this year is last year's team ceiling, because you mentioned it. You only had 1 game in 12 last season where you could say the offensive line's performance wasn't somewhere between substandard and catastrophically bad. That's not going to be this year's offensive line. There will probably be games where we think, hey, like the offensive line is probably what kept you from winning this football game. I don't want to put a loss on them, but that's not a crazy scenario here, is it? But I still think you're going to get more out of this year. I still think this is going to be an offensive line that will allow you to do a whole lot more than what last year's did, where it was just a constant hindrance, and you already had a lot of things working against you that season before you got to what was just a catastrophically bad O-line, which I don't think this group is by any stretch.
Yeah, I definitely don't think this O-line is catastrophic. Do I think it's going to be the best one in the Big 12 or anything like that? No, but I think this is the type of O-line that can sustain an offense that gets you to a bowl game, that gets you 7 wins, 8 wins, something like that.
pretty conservative game plan on the whole, and understandable why it would be. Why would you show a bunch of stuff on film against an opponent that you believe you're good enough to be comfortable with, which is what happened. I saw someone, and I initially did this before I corrected myself, but I saw someone saying, why didn't you get a little more creative on the 4th and 1 play where the Cougars kind of ran between the tackles and didn't get the first down there? And obviously, like I would like to have seen us get the first down there. I would like to have seen us run the ball somewhat more convincingly against SFA, but why would you show anything? Like, why would you show anything here? Like, this is the exact kind of game where you're like, you know what? I want to stress test this offensive line. I want to see, can we get a hard yard or two when our opponent kind of knows what's coming? Unfortunately, the answer is no, but I don't mind that you did it in this game. I get in that case that I just mentioned why that's the call. You want to test out your O-line. You want to see what these guys are made of. Why are you going to show a pop pass or a more creative play call now? This was a basic game plan kind of opponent. And this game was also a great example of complementary football. Your defense did their job so well that Willie Fritz and the offensive staff never had to think about whether or not you really had to break the seal on a more, I guess, creative, a more adventurous game plan because your offense was under significant pressure to score a lot of points. I was out here in my current city of residence, Las Vegas, at UNLV's Week 0 game, and I could tell watching that one live that UNLV really wanted to run a conservative, basic game plan, and then they went into the locker room trailing at the half, and you could kind of see in the third quarter the staff realize we have to win this football game. Like, this is going to be catastrophically bad, and they got a little more adventurous and had to do that to avoid potentially awful loss, and that was never, ever the case in this one. Can't say enough good stuff about Tanner Koziol, at least as a receiver. I think we've, between the two of us, discussed that some of the not great blocking you could probably lay at his feet, but you could also lay at his feet the most sustained success that this passing game had. But I also wanted to shout out Amari Thomas, his Cougar debut coming over from UAB. Mm-hmm. 3 receptions, 2 for first downs, and then the other on the receiving end of probably the most exciting offensive play of the game, the last touchdown. And as we mentioned it by now, absolutely perfect route where he beat a great college DB and probable future pro one-on-one. So a lot to be excited about there, even if you want to see the receivers get open more and maybe see a bit more of an adventurous pass game, all things being equal.
Yeah, I think, you kind of shouted that out there, but I think you saw what you kind of wanted to see from this offense. There's definitely some questions that you would like to see answered a little bit better, but you can pick nits all you want to. Cougs did enough to get the W. So overall, not too bad of a Thursday. That wasn't. I mean, Sam, let's be honest. Last year, I think that team last year beats this SFA team, but buddy? There were moments last year where I don't know if they would have.
Yeah, like what they like SFA's defensive line looked pretty punchy. What would that have done? What would that have done to our
exactly
our 2024 offensive line? I just realized didn't mention when I shout out Jamarion Fat with a PH Burnett. I think the most exciting of all your backs who saw a decent amount of run out there. 10 carries for 40 yards, was in the right places. Wigman did some improvisation and got the reception, took it 39 yards. For the touchdown, you saw flashes from him last year, but and not that you didn't see good stuff periodically from Stacey Sneed, Dean Connors, and even a little later, DJ Butler. But very excited about him. I think this is going to be generally a running back by committee, but I'm curious if against the higher level opponents, you see this rotation of backs and these carries get a bit tighter, and maybe we see a big kind of throwback guy like Burnett maybe get 20, 25 carries against the right opponent.
Yeah, he played really well. Like you said, it's going to be by committee. But one of the things that they did mention is that Coach Fritz wanted that true number one running back, that bell cow kind of running back, and Burnett kind of looked like he put his claim in for that.
Yeah, and you got the not great news after the game that Rashawn Sanford will be out for this season. So that's obviously wish he was there. One fewer guy there, but I guess if it's going to happen in a position group, possibly the deepest one you have on the team, the one you expected to go 3 or 4 deep in.
Right.
I guess, excited for him to come back. Obviously not thrilled about that. Very, very low stakes thought for you if you don't mind. I think I've shared this with you via text message. not wild about Zion Chris in his series in the fourth quarter. He didn't look appreciably more composed or effective as he did last season, where he was mostly not very good as your starting quarterback. And I think I also texted you this. I don't know at what point you start thinking about, obviously with this guy, preserve the red shirt, but do you start thinking about Austin Carlisle being the QB2 and then maybe finding non-quarterback ways to get Zion on the field? Because you don't want to overreact to fourth quarter series in a game where you're not trying to do anything but like run out the clock and go home. But it looked exactly like we saw from Zion Chris in 2024, and that's not good.
Yeah, it was rough, buddy. It was rough.
I'm timing myself so I don't go any longer than we've already done. I have exactly 3 special teams thoughts, if you will allow me.
Yeah, hit me.
Ethan Sanchez looked great on those 2 field goal attempts. I don't know if he will be drastically better than what we've had at the position in recent years, but I'm at least reasonably confident he'll be somebody we don't stress about making stuff inside of 41 or 42 yards. And I think is capable of trying deeper stuff with some chance of hitting it, which is frankly what my only real sincere hope for us at the kicker position. Liam Doherty did outkick his coverage on, ended up being a long SFA punt return, had a couple touchbacks where maybe you would have liked to pin him deep, but I like how much power we're seeing him punt with. Not really wild about the fact that we couldn't do anything in the return game against the 12th toughest out of 12 regular season opponents. Not really a big negative takeaway, but I guess it puts me in a position. I will believe we'll do anything in the return game against quality opponents exactly the moment I see it.
Yeah, I agree there.
All right, Bobby, you want to get to the game we have this coming week?
Oh my God, we have a game this week?
Possibly the last ever matchup between the Cougars and our rivals on South Main, the Rice Owls. A guest that you've certainly heard in this show, if you've heard us talk Rice U of H before, joined us again, and very excited for y'all to hear what we did chopping it up about this year's Bayou Bucket game. We are thrilled to welcome, for not the first time, to the Scott and Holland podcast, many-time guest, Rice expert, editor and founder at theroost.com, host with actual smart guy Carter Spires, because the 3 of us, I don't know if we would qualify as capital A, capital S, capital G, actual smart guy. So, Matt, I will table my question for about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and just keep it to Saturday's Bayou Bucket game. Great to have you back, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's been a minute, but between the 2 of our podcasts, we have chopped it up many a times.
So, for the Cougar fans listening who may be at most vaguely familiar that Rice made a football coaching change last year and not knowing much else, who is Rice's new head football coach, Scott Abel, and what do you believe is the big picture logic from Rice's athletic and university leadership on making this hire?
Oh, it's fun, man. I think when you're in a situation like Rice, where there's a lot of just systemic disadvantages in the sport inherent against competing at the level that you're competing at, you can try and do what everybody else does, or you can try and be different. And so I give the Rice administration a lot of credit so far, looking pretty good for going zigging where everybody's zagging. So they got to hire Scott Abel, who was the head coach at Davidson, the Steph Curry school. For those who haven't thought about Davidson in a minute, running a version, he calls it the gun choice, but it's a spread option system kind of based off some triple option and some zone read principles together. So doing something that really nobody else is doing in college football quite like this. And Davidson led the country in rushing 5 of the last 6 seasons. And so they figured, hey, it's different. It's unique. It's worked everywhere he's gone. Can he do it here? And so far, 1 game in, 1-0.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest question around Rice football under Abel, as you said, is going to be this option-style offense he's ran historically and looks to be running at Rice through 1 game. Now that we do have that 1 full game of this offense, what are your thoughts on how it functioned as compared to your expectations coming into the season?
Man, it's one thing to see practice reps. Like I've seen these same, because the beauty of the triple option and the curse of it, right, is that it's not like these, Madden playbooks where you have 700 plays. You have a couple, like there's 3 or 4 base triple plays, and then you're running variations off of that. depending on what the defense gives you, because you're reading, right? And so I've seen these same triple option plays 100 times between the spring and fall camp, but to go see it on the field on Saturday against a different defense, man, it's exciting. I think it's a lot of simplifying it and using space and speed to your advantage, which is something that has certainly helped out and paid off so far. So yeah, early returns, I've been really optimistic. It seems to fit. And Rice has gone option before, so this is not the first time, but it's the first to do it quite like this.
I was going to say, I always tell people, obviously I grew up in the same city as the University of Houston. I'm not going to say my childhood and becoming a fan of sports and college football didn't at all intersect with U of H, but it intersected a lot because I grew up a lot closer to Rice. And quite frankly, not that either team was especially good, but I mean, for about 1996 to 2002, it was my formative years, like following football, like, no, Rice was certainly the better team over that stretch and did it really running the triple option with Ken Hatfield himself, a longtime SWC coach at Arkansas, Air Force, Clemson, and numerous other places. So yeah, historic precedent to that. Because we only have
Texas
this
running the option.
Yeah, exactly. What would you attribute, right? I guess we only have this one game to look at. We're zooming in more than we expected because we basically have one game of Scott Abel and this offense at Rice. What would you attribute Rice's scoreless second half against UALA on Saturday to? Even acknowledging that, which I'm sure you would, that there was one possession that ended 4th and goal on the 1 yard line. Not all scoreless halves are created equal. What do you attribute that half to? Just now watching that and probably reviewing it some.
Yeah, well, and I was chatting with some folks from the ULL side in the press box as well. It is the blessing and the curse of this offense, right? When it's going and you're on schedule, man, it is lethal. When you get behind schedule, it's scary. And you look at the second half against Louisiana, Rice had 3 straight 3-and-outs where first or second down, they got behind schedule and they got themselves in 3rd and long. So some of those 3rd and long situations, there was a misfired pass that probably should have been completed. It looked like a bad read where something got blown up, and then Louisiana just guessed right and blew them up in the backfield. So I don't think it's, looking back and rewatching the game, I don't think it was quite as bad as it seemed at the time. Their first possession in the second half, they marched straight down the field until ran into a bad, and Coach Abel took ownership of this at the press conference this week. He said, yeah, I tried to go for broke on a second down play and I shouldn't have. And or he didn't say he shouldn't have. He's like, that's my fault. We did it and it went backwards. So, and then you end the game with that big drive down to the 1 yard line. So I think it was just, if one of those drives ends in a field goal and you score at the end, then you're looking at a 20 some odd point game and you're like, it's fine. So I think the offensive sputtering was, the scoreboard maybe makes it look worse than it was, but it's certainly just the nature of this offense. If you're going to drop back, Rice threw 4 passes beyond the line of scrimmage on Saturday. If you're going to throw 4 passes beyond the line of scrimmage and you miss on 2 of them, that's half.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of offense. That's what's going to catch a lot of people's attention. But, we can also talk about the defense a little bit. The new staff has entirely new coordinators and very few retained coaches whenever there's a coaching change. But Scott Abel retained John Kay, who had been on staff before as the linebackers coach, and they actually promoted him to defensive coordinator. What was kind of the logic behind that, and how much of Rice's strong week 1 defensive performance comes from having that familiar voice in the locker room?
Well, I think you just talk to coaches around the state, and John Kay is one of the most respected names in the state. At the high school level, at the college level, you talk to anybody and they're like, John Kay is a heck of a football coach. Like, won state championships, many of them at North Shore, and just cruised through the highest level of high school football. So there's a lot of respect there. So when Abel came in here, initially there was hope they might be able to retain Brian Smith, their previous defensive coordinator. He left and took a job at Temple, and he just kind of asked around what Abel wants, which I think is honestly refreshing. Is he calls the plays. He's the de facto offensive coordinator that is in charge of that. He said, I want a head coach of the defense. I want somebody that I can just say, here, this is your baby. You got it. I'm not going to micromanage. And that's really what he did. And Kay was an excellent defensive coach at the high school level. He's coached linebackers at Rice for 2 years. and just really seems to be gelling. So there's some uniquenesses. It's a different scheme, but a lot of the same initial root and philosophy is there. So it's maybe less of a total rework on that side of the ball. And then a bunch of guys on the defense have played parts in this defense before. They lost a lot of their top end talent, but most of their role guys that have been members of this unit were playing already. So you combine a new title, but a familiar face that brought back corners coach Jeremy Modkins as well, and a lot of the same pieces. And this was already one of the better defenses in the American last year, and then just took Louisiana to the woodshed in their opening game. 1 touchdown allowed in 4 quarters.
Oh yeah, I was rewatching the ESPN Plus broadcast, and the ULL TV guys mentioned a percent. It was like 27%. You could tell me of like the starts that were back. But I also noticed when I was like watching the Rice defensive series, like I recognized a lot of the names. I'm like, I remember these guys from the last 2 years of previewing them. So if there's like not a lot of starts returning, like there are still key guys. There are still guys where I'm like, I remember him being one of the top names there. I'm sure that helps. What was the biggest surprise to you? This could be either side of the ball. It could be special teams, I guess, if it applies, from this week 1 win over ULL.
It was the trenches, and it was twofold, right? So one of the biggest hesitancies with people, and as Rice has considered the option in years past, is like getting an offensive line that can run the option doesn't look like an offensive line that can run just a regular spread. And for better or worse, Rice had apparently an option offensive line ready and waiting. So they brought back one guy as I guess 2 returning starters, a center and a guard, and the other guys were already on the roster, already in the room, and have kind of been reworked. And Scott Abel, from beginning of spring practice, he said, I'm just floored at how good this offensive line is. Like, he just was not blowing smoke. He's just like, this unit, the offensive line is so much better than I thought we would be at this point. And you go back, and it was blowing Louisiana off the ball. Like there you have plays where you go back and watch that game, and you have like one 280-pound guard that's blocking a defensive lineman and a linebacker at the same time and clearing space. And you're just like, so that was phenomenal. It was as advertised. And then on the defensive line, also is impressive that, they were kind of thin after spring and said, we need to go get some guys. And they got 3 defensive linemen in the portal after the summer, which is not possible. Like, y'all are familiar with portal cycles. You can't find linemen, period. And you definitely can't find them in the summer.
And just guys generally get to school at Rice. I mean, like, it's not.
Yeah. So they shot the moon, and they found 3 guys in the portal that came in and were just difference makers. You like Tony Anianwu, who came through SFA, was at Baylor previously, was just a homewrecker off the edge against Louisiana, and looks to be one of the 1-game sample size. But as far as a pure pass rusher, a really good one compared to some of the ones that Rice have had in recent years. So twofold, the O-line being as good as they said it was going to be was pretty surprising. And then the defensive line trench reinforcements late in the cycle. I'm floored that they're playable players, let alone good players.
All right, so here's a question that we ask everybody. Longtime listeners will be familiar with it, and I'm sure we've asked you before in past seasons. And who is the Owls player that Sam and I are probably overlooking in our efforts to preview and kind of just understand this team?
I think it's got to be Dalen Alexander. Quentin Jackson at running back he wasn't maybe quite a household name. He was kind of the 1B to Dean Connors, who of course is across town right now, and has been a special teams player, been a lightly used guy in the past. He's kind of taken over the running back 1 duties, had 120 some odd yards, I think 180 all-purpose yards in their first game. So he's the alpha in this running back room. But what was most impressive was Dalen Alexander came in. He's really missed the past 2 seasons with injuries, but Houston fans might remember the name because he scored 3 red zone touchdowns against the Cougars when Rice won the bucket in 2023, and kind of came in. That. Yeah, it happened. I was there. But anyhow, he kind of came in, earned that role as the red zone guy in practice just because somebody went down, and then has been, hurt and working through injuries past 2 years. Came back and had, I think, like 12 carries for 75 yards as the number 2 back. in this offense, and is just if Quentin Jackson, a $160 soaking wet is the Lightning, then he is the Thunder, and he just kind of ran through some people. So I'm really interested to see what he does, because I think that 1-2 tandem, you're talking about an offense that's going to run the ball 40 times, 50 times, you're going to need a second back. I think that name is going to get a lot more run than Houston fans might expect.
Before I let you go, Matt, go a little big picture Bayou Bucket here. I'm going to ask you to look into the future. We'll say 5 years from now, 2030. In your opinion, in that time, will there be any movement on scheduling future Bayou Bucket games, or is this going to be the beginning of the longest period of these two programs not facing each other on the football field? Just your opinion.
Y'all tell me, what is Houston going to do? I think really it comes down to what all of these conferences need from their non-conference games. And I think that's really a power conference question. What is the Big 12 going to do? How many non-conference games are they going to play? What kind of caliber of conference games are they going to play? Because it's interesting, you look around the sport right now and you kind of have a desire for those upper tier group of 5 games and those marquee opponents that you can schedule in. I mean, like Boise and USF played a big game over last weekend, and some of those marquee brands that you'll bring in because you're like, okay, that's a name people care about. But otherwise, if you're a power conference program, like there's a reason that nobody schedules North Dakota State. I know that's FCS, but like there's no win. So if you're either bringing in the paycheck, you want a premier non-conference game, or you want somebody you can beat. And so the semantics and the hopeful wistfulness of, man, this rivalry was really cool back when I was a kid, doesn't cash checks. And that's what scares me. So yeah, I think there's a world where this game makes a lot of sense for both programs. I think if Houston believes they're the program that they say they're going to be, then they shouldn't be concerned about playing Rice in a renewing rivalry. If they are, that probably says they're not quite where they said they were going to be. And then for Rice, like, this is the perfect kind of power conference team that you want to beat. It's not Texas, who, like, you're never going to beat again. Like, you might, but you're 99 times out of 100. Versus Houston, there's a lot more similarities there, and you'll probably win that game more often. So I think it makes a lot of sense on paper for both those teams. I think whether or not that comes to fruition, I don't know. I'm skeptical just because I don't trust people that are guided by money. And that's the world we live in with college sports right now.
My 2 cents is because I think that and the scheduling stuff you said, I think they're really do we have it at Rice and Houston equal amount of times? Like, I think that's a sticking point. I don't know. I just say, have it at NRG. Like, I mean, I know, look, normally I am very against neutral site stuff, but if that is a sticking point,
if that's the only way we can do it, yeah,
that's what I mean. Yes.
Up. If we can do it every other year at NRG, sure.
Yeah.
Like, that would suck, but it would be better than not playing it.
Exactly. That's kind of, obviously, in a perfect world, it's on campuses because college football is best on campuses. But that's one thing I was thinking about, and fully agree. I really hope, not just because we enjoy having you on, but I enjoy this football game, and I don't think it would be a tragedy if we go 2 or 3 years without playing it, because, I mean, we didn't play it from 2015 to 16, didn't play it in 2019, and the world kept spinning. But if this game just ceases being played, considering how close these programs are, considering the shared history, I think we're all in agreement that would be very stupid. Matt,
yeah, and
I'm happy. Oh, sorry.
So much. Oh, sorry. I was just like, it's just mattered more than you would have thought it was in like the past 10 years. Like, this has been a game that, it one-sided or not, depending on the year, it's just like, man, like, people have been fired because of this game. People have kept their jobs because of this game on both sides. It matters.
Think of one specific Red Bull swelling head coach, Matt. Where can the people find you on the World Wide Web and the work you do writing about the Rice Owls?
Absolutely. At theroost.com, everywhere, social media, Patreon, you name it. We're busy talking about Rice.
I was finally able to watch Rice's game from Saturday night in full last night. It was Monday night on the ESPN app, and even acknowledging that week 1 of the college football season always produces the most volatile, the most outlier kind of results, I was really impressed with Rice's effort on the road and against one of the more consistently solid teams in the group of 5, I guess group of 6. We talked plenty about it with Matt, which you just heard, but Rice runs a fairly unique in this current era option offense, run, I think, pretty much exclusively from the shotgun formation. And one of those things I kept coming back to as I watched their game against UALA is they do a really good job of utilizing the slot backs who are lined up essentially as slot receivers, but are generally put in motion as part of their offense. This isn't the Navy option offense that you may have seen for so many years in our last conference. That one was mostly I formation, heavy on the fullback dive, tailbacks, maybe some slot backs, but this is definitely not that. But I will note this offense, unique as it is quite similar to what Willie Fritz's teams ran at Sam Houston, Georgia Southern, and at least his first few years at Tulane. Those offenses weren't being specifically called by Fritz or any current U of H assistant, but you would imagine there's some familiarity with it from almost a decade of it being his team's go-to offense. Slade Nagel was a position coach at Tulane when they ran it for a few years, so there's familiarity. But what probably stood out to me most from Rice's offense was how good their 2 highest usage running backs, Quentin Jackson and Dalen Alexander, looked against ULL. Neither guy's especially tall. Neither had a run longer than 17 yards on Saturday, but they didn't lose a single fucking yard, Bobby, on 39 carries. That's hard to do. And they were so good at getting the hard yards. And even their shorter runs generally allowed their offense to remain on schedule. I'm not as sold on their quarterback, Chase Jenkins, but considering their new staff didn't bring in a transfer quarterback or a high school recruit ready to contribute now, basically I had to pick from quarterbacks recruited to run a drastically different offense than their current one. I think Jenkins checks the boxes. He's mobile enough that you have to respect his ability to keep the ball. And I think probably the biggest check mark in his favor is that there were no fumbles and there weren't any near misses. I never saw him put the ball in danger.
Mm-hmm.
You never saw the pitches and timing with his teammates look anything but clean. Their offense didn't look perfect, but it didn't look like an offense that had just switched from a drastically different offense running the option for the first time. Usually when that happens, you see multiple fumbles, you see guys running into each other, the spacing being weird, and you just did not see that. Not as sold on
you would see like multiple bad reads, and like bad reads are going to happen in an option, but you didn't see it a ton here.
Yeah, I mean, almost when they went to the outside, almost never. I'm not saying every play was successful, but for the first time running this offense, looked a lot cleaner than you'd expect. But not as sold, even though he is Jenkins theoretically mobile enough to call his own number, he was pretty ineffective at actually doing that against ULL. And their offense isn't going to ask him to throw very much, but I mean, Matt mentioned it. They threw 4 times beyond the line of scrimmage. I'm not sold he can do that against U of H if Rice gets off schedule. And that Rice was able to periodically run the ball as well as they did with 3 underclassmen stars in the O-line playing their first serious college action. Really impressive. I do believe U of H's defensive front will ask tougher questions of their new local line than the Raging Cajuns did, but unbelievably good first start against an FBS opponent who is by no means a defensive pushover. Bobby, I've done a lot of talking here. What are your impressions of the Rice Owls?
Yeah, it's I went back and kind of watched their game as well because I just wasn't very, with it being that crazy work weekend, I just wasn't tuned in for it. Against an option, there's 2 things you need to do to be successful defensively, right? One is stick to your assignments. If the Cougs can do that, they must also do the second thing, which is tackle on first contact. When you play an option team, if that first guy doesn't make the tackle, he's too busy working on his assignment that he doesn't want to leave to chase after your guy if you miss the tackle. You have to at least slow him down enough for the cavalry to show up, but most likely we need you to make that first tackle or at least trip him up, do something along those lines. So number 2 is going to be super important. One of the things that gives me hope, for this game, besides what I would argue is a talent difference here. Not that those guys aren't talented, but right, P4 versus G5 or whatever we're calling it. is how well the Cougars, both inside and outside, tackled on first contact. There weren't a lot of broken tackles versus SFA, and that gives me hope, as we talked about from that game. It gives me hope that we are going to make the open field tackle. The DBs are going to be able to make the open field tackle. The linebackers, they looked great plugging up the holes. It's all going to come down to, can the Cougs stick to their assignments and not over pursue? You see it happen when it does whenever teams play an option team like this. A lot of times you're expecting like a triple option and there's no real threat of the quarterback to throw. With this offense, while they did only throw 4 across the line, and there's still that option where you hit them with the little pop pass out, a wide receiver bubble, something like that, where he shows the block and then all of a sudden you're rolling the quarterback out and he's hitting them for 15, 20 yards there. So, I think defensively, if you can stick to your assignments, which I think the Cougs can do, and tackle, you're going to be successful as well. And then on the offensive side, what you need to do is you need to do what you did in week 1, just a little bit better, right? You need to be efficient. You don't need a big play, something crazy over the top to beat this Rice team. They're going to control, if things are going well for the Cougs are going to dominate time of possession. If things are going poorly for the Cougs, you're going to see the Cougs not have the ball very often, and I think that's going to be a big key, is giving that defense a little bit of a break, getting some sustained drives where you're on the field for 5, 6, 7 minutes, kind of like you saw in some of the later, or coming out of halftime, I want to say, versus SFA. That drive was like 6.5 minutes. You need a couple of those to offset one big Rice kind of drive. So I need to see everything that I saw versus SFA just a little bit better. Do I think it's got to be the best to beat this Rice team? No. I think when we talk about the best performance you're going to put in all season, we need to see those to beat Arizona State. We need to see those to beat a Texas Tech, something like that. But against this Rice team, I need you to go from a C to a B minus, a B, somewhere in there, is kind of what I'm looking for there. So those are kind of my thoughts, kind of previewing this Rice team. If you can tackle on first contact, stick to your assignments. Not that I'm saying anything too groundbreaking here when it comes to option coverage. The offense just needs to come out, get a couple of sustained drives, and then let Rice go 3 and out, get them behind the chains, make a couple of stops where they're in a 2nd and 13, something like that.
What scares me the most about this matchup, and this is in no way dismissing a Rice offense, is going to show a very unique look against the Cougars, or me overly buying into one very, very good game, but one very, very good game against an FCS opponent. It's the Rice defense. In the broadest sense, in some ways, the Raging Cajuns were unlucky that their quarterback went down from a non-contact injury on the final drive where they had to go 2-minute drill. You can't hide your backup quarterback on the last possession, and the guy went 0-for-6. They also had multiple turnovers in Rice territory and one of the worst displays of wide receivers dropping balls that should have been caught that I've seen. You saw it. You're nodding your head. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, they were bad.
It was rough. They not that Walker Howard, ULL's quarterback, was perfect, but they did not do their new quarterback any favors. And when I looked at the box score, ULL did more in the run game than I remember just from watching it. Though I do think they got to their 155 rushing yards more with a few big runs as compared to any consistent ability to get the run game going against Rice. But Rice did a really good job getting pressure on the quarterback. Something I don't think you could be totally sold on this Cougar line being able to prevent. And, I think it's just about keeping Rice from getting pressure quite as often as they did in Lafayette last Saturday. I also don't think, though, that Rice can count on U of H receivers dropping passes as often as their last opponent did. I think Connor Wigman will present more challenges than Walker Howard or Daniel Beal did on Saturday. Can still see the U of H offense periodically struggling in some of the same ways that you did against SFA. But I do think 4 scoring drives, at least 3 of those being touchdowns, will be enough to win this football game. This is going to be a low-scoring game. But we'll say, do not take this Owl defense lightly, because that's, quite frankly, as much as their offense showed some nice stuff, That's the reason why they're 1-0 and got this big road upset on Saturday. Mentioned a couple guys. They won't be big stat getters because of the position they play, but fifth-year senior Blake Benish and sophomore Qantas Clemens both gave ULL problems in the middle of that defensive line. Toby Anyanwu and Joseph Mutombo are both guys to watch as pass rushers as well. I believe Matt mentioned Anyanwu by name. This is still a game that the Cougars should expect to win, but not one that I'm wildly confident about. Just because at this point, I haven't yet seen a U of H offense that's good enough for me to be wildly confident about anyone yet, or at least anyone who is at least shown in one game to have somewhat of a pulse defensively.
Yeah, I think hopefully you win on talent here. And again, this is a game where we start to answer questions in that positive way. If you can look really good here, you start to get more and more towards the positive answering of some questions.
Any other thoughts on Rice, Bobby?
No, man. Let's move on to the next spot.
Yeah, we'll make some picks here. We're going to do our week 2 picks here momentarily, but a quick summary of how you and I did. In week 1, we both went 1-2. Bobby, you correctly picked that SFA would have fewer than 251.5 passing yards from our game props, but incorrectly on SFA plus 22.5 on the point spread, and the non-U of H game pick of Nebraska minus 6.5, and what ended up being a 23-20 Nebraska win over Cincy, where they did not cover, and Daniel Holgerson and Taylor Swift were at least briefly in the same venue. I correctly picked that the Cougars would cover the 22.5, but I was incorrect that the Cougar defense would force more than 2.5 turnovers. Especially painful with like 3 dropped picks in there. Like one of like
it was 4.
Yeah, I specifically I was like, you do not, Sam, do not mention that as a nitpicky like that. That does like your little pick'em thing doesn't matter here, but that's I guess the nit I would pick, like very much tongue in cheek. I also said Arizona State would cover 20.5 points against their FCS opponent Northern Arizona. They did no such thing. So this gives me a 25-15 lead as we wait our first pick, the heaviest. But even being a guy who loves smack to you, way too early for me to do that here, other than the Dude Perfect gif I sent you at about 12:30 my time earlier today.
I hate you so much.
Buddy, you ready for some week 2 picks?
Let's do it, man.
Bobby, what did you go with from the point spread and points totals from this one for our first pick?
Yep, pretty simple. I'm taking the Cougs minus 11.5. Which was very odd when you sent it to me that it was 11.5, because I'm pretty sure the Cougs opened at 14.
They did. You're correct. The line moved about 2.5 from Sunday to today,
crazy.
Tuesday.
Like maybe the 11, and you're looking at the defense kind of like you did, but that 11.5 kind of feels like this is gonna say. You know what? I'm not gonna say it. That 11.5 feels like a number I wanted to take there.
Yeah, I don't think I would have touched the Cougars minus 14. I would have given it more thought at 11.5, but I'm still not going to touch either side of that. Instead, for my point spreader game total pick, I'm going to take the game under of 39.5 points here. I believe the total will be close, but I could see this being a 27-10, 24-13 final score kind of game, given that both teams here involved want to play a low possession game. So I personally went with the under. For our second team prop pick from this Bayou Bucket game, the two of us agreed internally on some team stat categories like passing yards, rushing and passing TDs, interceptions, and turnovers forced to the defense as well. Bobby, I went with Rice to have under our rushing yards total, under 170.5 rushing yards, even though I believe they'll far outpace the numbers that SFA put up in week 1. I believe they had 39 rush yards. Well, I would love for that to be the case here. I don't think there's any scenario where Rice is held to only 39. I think this ends up probably being one of the higher rush totals we see this season just because of the style of offense, though I think the Cougars will hold them in check enough to win this football game and be under the 170.5 total that we agreed on. What was your pick for the team props?
Yeah, I'm going to go over on Rice passing yards. The secondary looked great last week, but we had it at what, 50.5?
Correct.
Yeah, 50.5 passing yards. I'm going over, not because I think the secondary looks bad. They had 49 last week versus Ulala. You had against an option team, all it takes is like one play action and they pop off for like a 40-yard pickup all of a sudden. Like that just sometimes happens when you play option teams. Not that I think it's going to be like this game changer or something like that, but you one of the things that you see with option teams is you kind of get lulled into this false sense of there's the dive, we ignore the dive, we play the dive, then we play the option, and the quarterback gets excited because the quarterback's running his way. Next thing he knows, the pass is over his head and a safety's trying to chase it down. So I don't think it's going to be many over 50, but I definitely think it will be 50. I think something in the 60, 65 range.
That might bode well for the Cougars. Just if Rice is having to throw it more than they did against ULL, that probably means they're chasing some kind of significant margin.
Yep.
Like they're never gonna go air raid here, but if they're having to pass more, like that probably means that you got them where you want to in the bigger picture. So for our third and final pick, our one pick of the week that does not involve the U of H game, though we agreed after inadvertently the two of us picking a Big 12 non-conference games, and then I actually, even before we agreed on this, I already had a Big 12 pick here. We've agreed that the pick 3 is going to be a Big 12 conference game or a non-conference game involving one Big 12 team. So for this one, I'm going with one of my most old reliable bets I've ever made on college football. I am taking the under of 41.5 points in Iowa at Iowa State.
Yeah,
colloquially known as El Asico. What'd you say?
I almost took that one. That was one of my options.
I thought about some other ones, and I was just like, no, go with the old reliable. This is no knock on ISU, who looks like a legit Big 12 title contender, but this game is never a shootout, even when one or both of the teams has a decent offense, and they both seem to have that this year, but this is just going to be one of those ones, kind of like Army-Navy. Army-Navy, I always fired the under, even though I don't think it hit last year. I probably would have taken this even if the total had been several points lower, so I'm going with the El Asico under. Bobby, who'd you take? Or what did you take?
Just a side note, one of my most reliable bets is taking A&M hosting Alabama at Kyle Field, because it's always like 20 points, and it's like they're gonna lose, but like they don't lose by 20 at Kyle, right? Anyways, you said a reliable bet, and I was like, oh man, yeah, here's mine. Look, I've been somebody who said ASU is going to take a step back. Arizona State's going to take a step back this year. But they will cover 6.5 points versus Mississippi State.
Back-to-back game of us, of one, not you last time, me last time. Mm-hmm. One of us being like, surely Arizona State will cover this. So that was 6.5, you said?
Yes, sir. I'm going to take them covering that. You know, what's funny, though, is my initial thought was Oklahoma State plus 28.5. versus Oregon, because that feels like a lot of points, and like Oklahoma State's not good, but like 28 feels like a lot. And then Gundy started running his mouth, and it's like, oh no, Dan Lanning is that bitch. Like Dan Lanning will, if they're up 28, he'll go, here's what we paid for it, and they'll put up 42.
Yeah, you saw what they did in Colorado 2 years ago when they were both in the Pac-12.
Yes. Dan Lanning shows no mercy, and Gundy's gonna get his this week versus Oregon. Just for talking smack. It's so whiny. Gundy complaining like, well, they should play teams that pay as much as they do.
You played UT Martin last week. What the fuck? Yeah.
And then like Oklahoma, like Gundy forgetting that, God rest his soul, but like T. Boone Pickens didn't exist. Like he wasn't funding that entire program for like 6 years. Like the stadium is T. Boone Pickens Stadium. T. Boone basically paid for everything, and he's like, oh, but they should play people that pay as much as that. Shut up, Gundy. Dude, you cut your own salary so that you could pay players, bro. Like, it's not like, you know, one of the things I said on Twitter today was like, I remember there was a team that had significantly less money than an Oklahoma State team and went into their house and beat them.
2009 season, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know.
Conference USA team?
Was I there? I might have been there for that.
Might have been there too.
Yeah. It's that was my initial thought, but I was like 28's a lot, and then it was like, oh wait, Gundy's running his mouth. Never mind.
Yeah, I mean, like his body of work at OSU, obviously, like unimpeachable. Like even acknowledging that he probably got more financial benefits than his predecessors from T. Boone Pickens giving what he gave. Like great tenure there, but man, you can't be coming off an 0 for Big 12 season and just nothing vibes wise around your program. Like I don't know why you're you're feeding the bear. I don't know why you're poking the bear. I don't know why you're trying to make Oregon a team that rightfully is a several score favorite over you. And it's not, I'm sure it's not like his fans like, yeah, get him, Gundy. They're probably having the same reaction you are. Just like, oh God, dude, what are you doing?
Shut up. They can hear you.
They can hear you. Like, this is, we want this to be more demoralizing than it's already going to be. And unfortunately, yeah. I almost
Lanning doesn't play. He's one of my favorite coaches in college football, and he does not play.
They're gonna beat him like 41-7, and then they're gonna have like a Nike funded like cinematic recap where like they had the most unflattering angle possible of like Mike Gundy from the other sideline.
Did you see just another? Not that we wanted to talk Gundy for 5 minutes, but did you see he did like a consumer cellular commercial,
like a TV spot?
Yeah, but he's like reiterating his "I'm a man, I'm 40."
Okay, that's okay. I regret to inform everyone listening that's actually kind of funny. Like Mike,
he's
Mike
like,
Gundy, you are slightly off my shit list.
Yeah,
now.
he's like, I'm not 40, I'm 58. You're not slipping any special fees past me, and it's like consumer cellular.
How did I miss? Man, I am looking that up after we get done with recording this. Bobby, before we end up talking about Mike Gundy for 10 minutes, guys, get Cougar volleyball that I think had, theoretically, I was going to say, I don't think you could have a better opening 3 matches than this program did. And you take the context of this as being a largely new roster. I don't think we took it as a given that Duke in their own building would be a walkover, but I think we thought 3-0 was very achievable and even almost the expectation. But you went 3-0 and didn't drop a single set over the entire long weekend in Durham. Like I said a moment ago, largely new cast of players, but no player from an offensive perspective was bigger for you than what Bree Reed gave you this weekend. She had 19 kills in the opening win against FIU, over double the number of any other U of H or FIU player. Was also tied for second on the Cougs in digs. This was something we mentioned in the preview. We talked about some being excited about potentially her not just being an offensive contributor, but being a two-way contributor like a lot of the really great outside hitters that have come to this program recently. Your Abby Jacksons, your Kenneth Sowers, just to name a couple of a much longer list. She was a definite standout offensive and defense contributor over the weekend. The offense was a bit more balanced in that win over Duke on Saturday, but Reed tied with Haley Schroeder with 13 kills, and you mostly looked at younger players in the finale against Bryant, but for good measure in the one set Reed play, she had 4 kills and hit 667, which, yeah, that'll play. Bobby, what stood out to you from the opening Cougar volleyball weekend?
Yeah, as I go through my notes, I'm kind of looking at everything that you talked about. Reed continually pops up. One of the things we were kind of worried about is setter. And you had Lottie Scully said, have no fear. I'm here. We are going to, you have no problems with your setter position. 32 assists in that game versus Duke. Crazy number. Just really good performance by her all weekend. And then the Cougs brought the defense in game 3 versus Bryant. Not that it definitely seemed like the Cougs just were going to win that game based on talent, but anytime you hold a team to hit minus 0.2 hitting percentage in the, it might have been 0.02 now that I'm like, you ever do
negative hitting, your larger point, negative hitting percentage.
Negative hitting percentage. You're doing something pretty well on the defensive side there. So, hard to ask for this weekend to go much better for Cougar volleyball.
In the broadest sense, I like that we saw that Bree Reed is capable of carrying your offense, but that you also have potential for other standouts like Haley Schroeder or in the Duke game. Maybe Alyssa Gonzalez, though she only featured a bunch against Bryant, to potentially step in there. I was so excited about the 3 matches from Kellen Morin.
That's exactly where, if you didn't mention it, I was going to mention her as well.
I was going to say, really excited to have her back because of what a difference maker she was in the 22 and 23 seasons. But when an athlete misses an entire season due to injury, you're always going to have some questions, and fair questions, in the back of your mind. And at least for these 3 matches, Morin didn't look to me like she'd missed any time.
No.
And you had the benefit that we had hoped for, that you have now her and Barakat Rahman, who had to take on a much bigger role last season at the net, and that Rahman looks a lot better with that experience, and that you're simply better for having Kellen Morin, because Kellen Morin is a special player. glad you mentioned Lottie Scully. That was one of those questions we had, whether we would see Scully, who came in from Binghamton, splitting reps with a freshman. And the answer is mostly no. I mean, we did see the blue chip recruit who we mentioned in our preview, Tennyson Fry, feature in the finale against Bryant, but the first two matches were probably more of an indicator of what this team's lineup and rotation are going to look like, at least here in the non-conference earlier part of the season. And Scully was getting all of your reps at center and a very, very healthy 9.4 assists per game, or assists per set average. Led the Cougs in digs per set after the opening weekend as well, which is really cool. At libero, it seems like Alana Torres Rivera, who was your returner, was Kate Georgiadis' backup previously, and your blue chip freshman Jillian Pitts are going to be splitting reps. I believe Dustin, our co-host emeritus, said in the opener that David Rare was even experimenting with some no libero looks out there as well. To me, this seems like the ideal situation. Pitts gets to be acclimated, to the speed of D1 volleyball. Even as an elite recruit, there's going to be a step up there. You have Torres Rivera also seeing action. Yeah, I think you can only learn so much from 3 matches, but oh man, I'm trying not to get over my skis, and we're gonna with that next program we talk about with Cougar Soccer, trying not to get over our skis about that one, but really, really exciting start. And I like that U of H, you might have noticed this, that you had to win close sets to finish off both the FIU and Duke wins, because that was a real problem you had last year. You struggled finishing off opponents after getting off to strong starts. I mean, go look at last year's non-conference. In my opinion, you have perfect examples of that. Losses to La and Ole Miss in non-conference play at home in matches where you at one point had the lead. Much as I think we're both happy this was a 3-0 weekend without a single set dropped, I still like that you had to, at least in a couple instances, dig deep to finish off the 2 highest quality opponents you were going to see, and that you did it with mostly new faces.
Yeah, I think to your point, that was a big problem that we had last year. You'd get up in a set like 17-13, something like that, and you just weren't able to close it. You would be up 2-1, and you just would lose the final 2. We saw that a lot. Yeah, I think if you are, beggars, choosers, that whole thing, I think if you're being choosy, maybe you'd want to see a little bit more of a blowout in some sets, but you learned a decent amount about your team this weekend. Yeah,
from what I can tell, you subbed very, very liberally and probably played most of the players who made the trip to Durham, I would imagine, in the finale against Bryant.
Yep.
I was going to say, just take the FIU game as an example of how new this team is. 10 players in total saw action in that one. 6 weren't on the roster last season, period. And 7 didn't see the court for you last year, which includes Kellen Morin, who was here, but didn't play due to injury last season. So I don't think you take it for granted that such a new group, as much as they've played together and done all the things that teams do in fall camp to bond, it's a whole different animal to actually play in the game. And couldn't have looked better. 9 sets played, 9 sets won. Very, very exciting stuff.
Yep.
So the coming week, the Cougs will be hosting one of our favorite fall on-campus annual events, the Flo Hyman Classic, an event that much younger versions of the two of us and our co-host emeritus were ball boys and consumers of free pizza at roughly 16, 17 years ago at the Athletics and Alumni Center. Now, thankfully, this event in the much cushier digs of the Fertitta Center. On the whole, I think a much tougher slate of opponents than your opening weekend, though not impossible that the Cougs can win all 3. The opener is Thursday at 7 p.m. against San Diego State. They split their opening 2 matches, a 3-1 loss to Cal and a 3-0 win over the University of San Francisco, both in Berkeley. Last season, the Aztecs were 20-10, and the 5 seed in the Mountain West tournament. Solid team, but not an NCAA at-large kind of team. The Cougars on Friday will be seeing a familiar face in the Omaha Mavericks. That was actually the team the Cougs opened the 2024 season against. It was a dramatic 3-2 win. And Omaha was a tournament team 2 seasons ago, and they had their conference's best record last season, but classic small conference problems, missed the NCAA tournament because they lost to another mid-major volleyball power, South Dakota, which trivia question. That's the team Kate Georgiadis did the save off the table against. They lost to South Dakota in their conference tournament semis, and the biggest name of the weekend's opponents, Saturday at 4 p.m., the LSU Tigers. Though LSU has not really been a volleyball power at least the last 2 seasons. I do actually remember U of H, they had an early season event in Baton Rouge in 2022, which was Rare's first tournament team. U of H beat them, and I remember at the time that being kind of an eye-opening result for a team that ended up being quite good, better than any Cougar volleyball team in a long, long time. LSU wasn't terrible last year and will almost certainly be better than Duke. Very nearly took down number 10 SMU at home in 5 sets in their season opener. Still an opponent I believe U of H should be a slight favorite against at home. My big picture thought here, 2-1 weekends the base expectation, and 3-0 against these opponents will start to get me really, really excited about 2025 Cougar volleyball. Excited like maybe I was too modest in my preseason predictions for this team.
Yeah, I think if you go 3-0 here, to your point, that 11th preseason ranking for the Big 12 really starts to, you start to get excited about how wrong that very well could be.
So quickly shifting to Cougar soccer, not a whole ton going on there. We knew going into the week that it would be one game against a fairly high-matched opponent. Ended up being a different one. The Cougars were originally scheduled to play ULM on Sunday, but a ferocious Houston rainstorm, the kind of rainstorm that any Houstonian, former or current, knows well, ended up canceling the Sunday game. Cougs ended up playing Southern on Monday morning. Southern had actually been in town to play HBU on Sunday. Either case, an opponent that the Cougs should have expected to beat by a pretty large margin, though I will note that Southern played a perennially pretty good SMU team and only lost 2-0 in Dallas a little bit earlier in non-conference play. This one was very not close. The Cougs scored twice in the first 13 minutes and ultimately were up 5-0 at the half and won 6-0. The one stat I will bring up from this, Bobby, did you see how many shots the Cougs had on goal? If not, I would love to tell you.
No, how many was it?
47.
That feels good.
Pretty good. You should be doing this against this level opponent, but pretty good. And more importantly, only allowed 2 shots. Your coach probably subbed as liberally as he will in a game this season. You got both of the goalies who've seen action for you, some time out there this year. Nothing really to take from this game specifically. One of those things that we got fooled on during the last head coach's tenure was some big gaudy wins against way overmatched opponents and then just not translating against anyone worth a damn. But you put this result in the context of everything else we've seen in this young season, it does nothing to damper our early enthusiasm for Cougar soccer. You watched at least some of that Monday morning match from Waffle House, didn't you?
Not Waffle House, from Joe's Coffee Shop, where Irving meets and eats. Tammy, shout out Tammy. There's a less than 0% chance she will ever hear this, but Tammy is a goddess. We love Tammy. We stand Tammy.
We love Tammy on the show.
Great waffle here. Great waffle. But yes, I did have it up while I was eating my waffle at Joe's Coffee Shop. So, no.
I'm kind of, I like Waffle House fine, but I'm kind of glad I got to plug a mom and pop diner more than
here we go.
Waffle House Corporation.
But yeah, it was, I think I texted you after the second goal about 12 minutes into the game, and I was like, this one might get ugly. And then I proceeded to I proceeded to click out and was like, yeah, that's probably going the way that I think it will. Overall thoughts, though, it's really taking a lot for me not to get over my skis here. There's a lot to be excited about. He had a big turnaround at SFA last year, and it's kind of hard not to go like, is he doing it here as well? We saw the big win versus Texas. These are games that we didn't just like, even against inferior opponents, just talent-wise, these aren't games that we won 5-0 last year or the year before under the previous administration. So that's, I think, more exciting to me than just winning. You're winning, but you're winning in ways that we didn't see before, which is a different feeling. And if you're doing something different, like if something feels different or you're getting a different result, that's usually a good sign because it means something's changing.
Yeah, I mean, and I think what adding to the excitement is the fact that there are 2 or 3 Big 12 teams that are quite good, that you will need something like your best effort of the season to get a result against. But it's slightly more conceivable that this team can do that than any of the last few. And also, Big 12 soccer on the whole isn't that good. Like there's room to immediately shoot up a lot of places because you're not this isn't a volleyball situation. This isn't a women's basketball situation. This isn't a tennis situation where there's 8 or 9 just absolute killer programs in the league. Like you need to be top 8 to get to the conference tournament. I'm by no means guaranteeing U of H will be there at the end of the season. It is not laughably hard to consider that if you end up really being the best version of yourself here over the next like month and a half or so of the remaining season.
100%.
So a slightly busier week to come. The Cougs will host McNeese on Thursday night in Houston and then go to SFA, Ben Williams' former employer, on Sunday evening. Not much to say about McNeese. They lost 6-0 at home to North Dakota and just gave up 3 at home to Alcorn State. I think this one will be quite similar to the Southern game we just got done talking about. SFA is a little bit more worth keeping an eye on with the obvious storyline, Ben Williams coming back and after leading them to their biggest turnaround in the NCAA tournament last season. Williams and both of SFA's full-time assistants are now at U of H, along with several key contributors from that team who are now wearing Cougar red and white. I looked it up. Their new head coach, because obviously they promote from within because that whole staff is here now. The new head coach is Ashley Whittemore, who had previously been an assistant at SFA under a previous head coach, was most recently coaching ECNL, which is high-level girls club soccer, something Ben Williams coached a fair amount of in the Houston area. She did that in Texas previously. Hasn't been a great start to the Lady Jacks 2025 season. They lost 3-2 at Tulsa, 5-1 to Texas State, and will likely be coming into Sunday evening off of a hard loss to Texas A&M where they play Thursday night. But I'm also sure they'll be fairly motivated to play against their former coach. I'd imagine there's still some roster holdovers there and play against some of their former teammates. And there'll probably be a decent crowd out there Sunday night with a Big 12 program on campus. I'm not going to say they're going to draw 5,000 people there, but there'll be enough people who say, like Houston's, it's a Big 12 team here. You might get a slightly bigger than average crowd for that one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I think if you are this improved team like you and I believe Houston Cougar soccer is, even on the road, also, if I mentioned, certainly against McNeese, you need to be 2-0 this week and not have any bad losses before you get to, I think, the much more challenging part of this the slate against Big 12 opponents.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to go 2-0 here. Start it. That's going to keep that momentum heading into Big 12 play.
So very, very quickly, because we're about 90 minutes into this show, but couldn't go this whole episode without mentioning it. We don't generally cover the Cougar cross country season because usually the team isn't very good, but I'm going to shout them out here at the end because the men's and women's teams did noteworthy things from the past weekend from their season opener. The Cougs competed in the UIW Twilight on Friday evening. The women won their first team meet since 2021, and the Cougar men's team had their an individual athlete capture the individual title as freshman Zach Miller won his first ever collegiate race back in his hometown of San Antonio, which is pretty cool. For the women, redshirt freshman Addison Fight, also in her first college cross-country meet, finished second among all competitors, and sophomore Cadence Patterson finished just behind Fight in third, and you also had sophomore Lily Campos finishing in fifth place. Surface level analysis, nearly every player I just mentioned, Bobby, and every player really in the extended U of H web write-up of this was a freshman or sophomore of some type, which, I mean, hey, maybe you could develop these athletes by the time that they're in their college careers into, I think, a pretty solid squad. And not entirely unprecedented to have a high-level distance athlete come out of Cougar track and field in our earliest seasons doing this show. There was Brian Barraza, who was a high-level distance runner, and man, but for a slip of the foot, might have been the NCAA champion in the steeplechase in the, I believe it was the 2018. Yeah, 2018, because 2019 was in Austin when we went outdoors, but for his foot clipping a barrier late. And last offseason, Will Blackburn, your director of track and field, hired an assistant from Oklahoma State who themselves an elite distance program. And I remember being intrigued for about 30 seconds when I saw it. Would love to have a reason to regularly check in on cross country. We shall see on that, but just want to give these athletes a shout out for a really standout performance.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Anytime you get a win doesn't matter who you're competing against. It always feels good.
No doubt. All right, buddy. We're very deep into this long episode. We made it to the end. Take us home.
Well, that's it for this episode. As you guys heard, we are an hour and a half in, maybe even a little bit longer once we start adding things in. But we want to thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any feedback for us, you can find us on social media, on Twitter at SH Podcast. If Twitter isn't really your thing, you want to go to Blue Sky, you can find us at podcast.bsky.social. If you have written off all social media, congrats to you. You can email us shpodcast@gmail.com, and you can find us on Patreon. You can search SH Podcast on Patreon, so patreon.com/SH Podcast. We got some post-game thoughts after football games, and we're really enjoying doing those. So that is it. Sam, what do we always say?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!